I told you back at the 28-week moving average, the last time we hit it, we very well could have a bottom right there that goes up and gets a lower high or a higher high. I told you that if we get the higher high scenario, here we got a lower high at the peak, here we got a higher high, and I talked about that at great length in detail. I told you this trend line right here, that we can go up to that trend line and we overthrew it. I told you we can either go up to it or overthrow it. If you go up and overthrow it, there are other trend lines like this one right here, which we ended up turning down off of right on the nose, just slightly overthrowing it. Like NASDAQ had the upper channel line here, we have this rising wedge trend line, and we overthrew that. But we overthrew the trend line, just exactly what I said. Remember, I kept telling you, my signals remain bullish. We're going up to this trend line. We're either going to overthrow it or reverse off of it, and you're likely going to get this divergence. And these divergences played out, and now we've given back most of the gains. We're coming down here, moving towards the lows here. Guess is, though, we're probably going to go lower. You have the low here at 49.53 on NASDAQ. You have the high over here at 48.18. My guess is you're going to find support around 49.53 to low 5,000 area, which is where our 200 period is coming in at. I think S&P will likely tag the 200 slightly below it and bottom. I think NASDAQ will get a good drop below it. S&P may find support at it. But again, we were told this wasn't going to happen, that there was no possible way that this could happen. And yet the indicators were correct. Again, people were so complacent. Patience was a virtue. And again, everything I told you that happened, we went up to the trend line, overthrew it, as I was warning. The other trend lines we talked about on NASDAQ and S&P, they came into play. And then we saw this big sell-off. Now, again, the bottom is going to form soon in all likelihood if, did you hear the word if the support levels that were coming down to the 200 period moving averages, horizontal support on NASDAQ, just above this 49.53 area on the S&P, I think that we could form a bottom. S&P, if it doesn't come down to 49.50, it still could form a head and shoulders. My guess, though, is S&P is probably going to go make a new high in all likelihood and get a larger divergence with Bitcoin. The NASDAQ, my guess, is going to make a lower high, but I think it's going to go back up and test the highs and hit the 20,400 area, just overthrow that area and put in a top exactly what Bitcoin just did. And then Bitcoin, it collapsed right after that. Right now we have a kind of positive correlation going on with the market and Bitcoin again, negative correlation going on before. So I think the market is going to follow Bitcoin back up as it had the July low and rally back up into July 29th high. I think that the S&P and NASDAQ will do the same thing. Divergences, again, they were correct. Now, again, if we go up, make a new high, it might be that we see the MACD come back up here and turn back up and go make a new high like we did over here in late or early 2022. And again, get another reference point of a divergence. I think that's very, very possible that we see something like that happen. Again, NASDAQ starts taking out 17,000. S&P starts losing the 49.53 area. You have this 48.18 area below that. You lose these levels of support, then a whole lot lower, and we have a trend line right here coming in at right there, which is at this 48.18 area, and again, a nice looking parallel channel there. So again, channels change. We overthrew this trend line, and again, I talked about overthrowing it or coming up to it. And again, trend lines change all the time. And we have this now channel, the trend line right here. We broke this trend line right here. And again, we had a channel there previously. Channels change and expand all the time. So again, just something worth paying attention to here on the S&P 500. These levels, should we move beyond the 200 period, you have horizontal support here and then horizontal support here and the rising trend right here. My guess is we're going to try to bounce around the 200 period moving average. But like I said, if those levels break, then you've got the rising trend line right here and you've got your 48.18 area down over here. So we'll be watching to see what happens. Wouldn't be surprised to see a bottom around the 200 period and a rally back up to fill the gaps and a new high on NASDAQ in all likelihood. If hear the word if again there. If my signals can turn back to bullish, my signals remain bearish. The S&P had a rally. We were up 1% on the S&P like NASDAQ, but we gave it back. We had a rally of 50, almost 54 points, but we gave back over half the rally. We gave back 72 points. We're up 126, and we gave back most of it, and we only closed up 54 points. So back more than half the rally, got a low topping tail at the 100 period, and again coming back and filling the gap on an intraday basis. Still might attempt to do it, but again that topping tail could give us another push down. Here in the daily time frame, look at this. Again, we broke this level of support. This is our log scaling. We broke this trend line right here. Again, we closed at the 100 period right when the NASDAQ was at the trend line of support. The NASDAQ followed and broke it this week. S&P broke it the previous week, and now we're moving down. And again, the rally is likely a counter trend. Whether it's done or not, we'll see. But you got a topping tail, and you gave back 71 points of the rally. So again, I do think we're coming down to the 200, currently at 5,016. It can continue to rise. Just tag it. We may overthrow it. If you overthrow it, then again, you can go below the 5,000 area and as low as this 49.53 area. If that breaks, you've got, again, more support, longer-term rising trend line on the weekly time frame that I showed you at the 4,800 area and horizontal support at 48.18. So again, going to be looking for a potential bottom surrounding the 200 period. It might be S&P moves to the 200 and bounces off of it and bottoms. It might be, and it's going to continue to rise here, and it might be that NASDAQ goes below the 200 period moving average and bottoms near horizontal support. So we'll be watching. But again, you got a possible head and shoulders here. I still think you got a pretty good shot. S&P is going to go back and fill this gap and move to a new high in all likelihood. Once we bottom out here, I am looking for a bottom. I do believe we're probably going down to the 200 period moving average. If we try to see the NASDAQ rebound, we could rebound off the 100 on the S&P, try to go back and fill the gaps. But I told you, if NASDAQ breaks that trend line decisively, then again, we're likely going back to these levels right here and now. I told you back up here at the top, S&P diverged from NASDAQ. A few days later, this negative divergence, talked about all of that back up at the top. After lower the very next day, all my signals for momentum turned bearish. They remain bearish. Even this rally, it's done nothing to change my signals. And trend signals remain bearish, so we could still go lower. But they could bottom around this area because this is a major level of support, the 200 and horizontal support. I told you, S&P still might try to rebound and go back up and fill those gaps and test the highs, probably move to a new high. That's what Bitcoin did. But Bitcoin moved down to the 200, beyond it, so NASDAQ will likely move beyond it. I told you, if NASDAQ broke its trend line, this is likely where we're headed on the S&P. So again, we continue to believe topping process, but probably going to form a bottom and then attempt some kind of recovery. So we'll be watching. We're oversold with the stochastic here. CD is not turning up yet. It's still pointing down. It's in negative territory. So again, you'll probably see a bottoming process form over time here down in the areas that I'm talking about. We are at extremes here on the RSI. We'll see if we attempt a bigger rally, but you did get a topping tail and you did get back over half of the rally we had today stalling at the underbelly of our 100 period moving average. Again, if tensions in the Middle East begin to happen this week, that's possibly something that can rattle markets. But again, markets tend to bottom on bad news, and as I said, other geopolitical tensions have produced bottoms. Looking for a possible bottom here, but it's likely not done. I think we'll come down to this level and form a divergence on the MACD in the 60-minute time frame like I'm looking for with NASDAQ. And again, maybe the rally is terminated. We got a topping tail, little shooting star candlestick, and a red bar that followed. But we didn't fill the gap. We just filled it on an intraday basis. We didn't come up and do it on a closing basis, but we did do it on an intraday basis as far as the intraday low there for that day. Again, if we attempt to rally further and fill the gap, okay, a pullback and we get something like that, and then we can come down. I think this could be better defined. But if it rolls over and this terminates immediately, then again, we may see this come down and form a divergence sooner rather than later, and have that happen immediately. We'll be watching to see divergence forms, and if so, does it happen immediately or in the near future? But again, I do think we're going to get another low. We got a bottoming tail here with our low on Monday, but I think that we're still going to take out that low, in my opinion. I don't think that the bottom is in. Just like everybody thought, oh, the bottom's in over here. Even though I told you we were going to come back up here, fill the gap, and then resume the decline, stalled just under the gap. I told you, hey, we're going to hit that gap and then we're going to turn lower. Right here, S&P tried to find support at that trend line. We had just violated a couple of times. So I told you if NASDAQ found the trend line of support, then we could try to bounce there. NASDAQ broke the trend line this week. S&P broke the trend line last week decisively, and we talked about that. Again, if this counter trend's done, looking for a low, if it's a little bit more room to run, if we make it towards the 50-period moving average and try to fill the gap right here, not very straight, but try to fill the gap up here, then again, we may buy some more time, but going to be watching for the MACD, however it does it immediately or, over time here, going to be watching for a bullish divergence to develop, and I think that will take us closer to that 200 period, closer to the 5,000 area. We bounced here off the low 5,100 area. I think we're going down to the low 5,000 area to test the 200. Maybe we lose that and go a little bit beyond it into the 4,900 area. Looking for a bottom in all likelihood below or between the 4,953 area and the low 5,000 area. That's where I think S&P could bottom out. Did have a rally today, and the VIX did predict it, by the way. Please support the channel with the link directly below that allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like the chart, if you like the indicators, then please support the channel. I don't have any sponsors, just a direct relationship with you. I turn those offers down because I don't want to make merchandise of you. I just put it out there so that you do what you can to help out, but I need to hear from you in order to make it work. If you could take a moment to do that, just follow the link below, take you to a secured site, and you could donate any amount you want. If you could take a moment to do that, I would really, really appreciate it. Thank you for your consideration for that. Now, the VIX was down today, down by 28%. That means the VIX in the next two trading sessions is now predicting a down day for the S&P 500 by 95% chance in the next two trading sessions. Now, as I said, these calculations, when you start going parabolic, they become less accurate, okay? And keep that in mind. The prediction that we had the previous two sessions on a Monday, Friday, they were predicting a rally within two trading sessions, and we got it, a down day for the VIX and a rally on the S&P, and we did get that for the S&P 500 today. So the VIX did get it correct, even though it is going parabolic. It did get that prediction correct, and we have another prediction today. And again, this is just based on probability, looking at historical data, the closing of historical data. I find in my studies that when it starts going parabolic, like we saw with the pandemic, for instance, the Lehman moment there with the crash, the VIX starts going parabolic. You throw it out the window, it doesn't work. Most of the time, it works. These moves of greater than 10 or 20% on the VIX. Here we had a greater than 20% move down. That's predicting that the S&P will have a down day in the next two trading sessions. We'll higher first, but it is predicting that. We did get an inside day on the VIX, though, which is a bearish Harami two-day pattern. You have a wide range bar, and then you're got an inside day the next session where you gap down and you trade within that previous day's trading range. That's a bearish reversal pattern, so it is still possible. I guess you got a shot at it. We did get topping tails today, but you got a shot at it going up a little bit higher to try to fill some of these gaps or maybe test the 50-period moving average. But right here, again, regardless of which way it plays out, I expect the rally is going to fill, and we're going to come down here to the 200-period moving average at 5,016 or maybe beyond it. Now, I want to tell you this. The VIX very well could have topped here, and even if this goes back up now or we go lower and it comes back up, again, the VIX is likely peaked. And selling off now, maybe the VIX, pops back up and we don't get this bearish pattern continuing, but if it pops back up, again, the VIX could peak and S&P can go lower. Tensions in the Middle East could do that. Concerns about recession, a lot of different things could do that. Economic data. The VIX very well may have topped right here, and if it does, S&P might bottom. Oftentimes the VIX will bottom or top just before the S&P bottom. So just food for thought there. Again, I told you back when we broke out right here, the S&P peaked that day. We got above the 50-period moving average, got above the trend line. The S&P peaked and we reversed. Get above the 50-period moving average, that's a green line right there. Bad things happen on the S&P 500. Oh, I love saying that. You get above the 50-period moving average on the VIX, bad things happen on the S&P 500. I had to say it one more time. but we're probably nearing a bottoming process, but it'll probably go down to the 200 or beyond the 200 period moving average. The RSI here has reached an extreme. We'll probably end up getting a confirmation of a lower high at some point if we do see volatility turned up immediately, if we start selling off immediately. As that happens, if we start seeing tensions in the Middle East, or VIX could still go lower and try to confirm this candle pattern. But let me say this, candle patterns are meaningless unless they are confirmed and you get a follow through. The VIX is predicting another down day. We may go higher first, but you did get topping tails on the daily and on the 60-minute charts. Now, I warned you at the top, we were getting the 9-count sell signal on the daily, and on the weekly, we got it before. We were slamming up into major resistance on the NASDAQ, and these sell signals were beginning to show up. Warned you that we were going to get the CPI, and again, sell off at the CPI at these levels of resistance. We did, and this followed, okay? After we sold off, I told you that we were going to rally back up, get a lower high, and get a much bigger sell-off. That's exactly what happened. We saw momentum flip with the lower high setting up, and then the trend signals flipped, and we saw this sell-off. We got the rebound right here. I tried to turn bullish, but again, momentum remains bearish. We have unconfirmed bullish signals, unconfirmed bottoming signals here. Nothing more than a counter trend. And again, signals, see the momentum line, it's still red. Trend signals are still bearish. So again, we hit the 200, we push back above it, we're getting a low topping tail. I think when NASDAQ's going to come down here, either maybe go a little higher and come down or come down, but I think you're going to come down towards the horizontal, and I went way too far with that, down to the 16,700 area or horizontal support, and I know it's not very straight, sorry, right around the 17,300 area below the 200 period. I think we'll push back below the 17,400 area, and I think in here you'll form some type of bottom, probably in the low 17,000 area, maybe the high 16,000 area. That's what I think is going on. See if the counter trend is done, but I do think that we're in a bottoming process, but we are going to eventually go lower. If we do buy a little bit more time, we'll be looking at the gap up here. We'll be looking at the gap here. We'll be looking to see if momentum eventually flips. Right now, momentum is still bearish. Trend signals are still bearish. Signals gave an outstanding warning sign of the reversal. That's a NASDAQ daily chart. Signal still bearish. No signs of a bottoming signal as of yet. And again, on these daily charts, here's the S&P. We could form a divergence immediately if we come down to the 200 period. And again, you've got divergences here forming with momentum. It may be that we do it very quickly and then try to bottom out sooner rather than later if we don't reach this 49.53 area down here. And again, our 200 period is at the 5,000 area. Thing with the S&P 500, signals try to turn here, but quickly failed. We couldn't flip the trend. Sorry about that. Couldn't flip the trend. And again, outstanding warning signs here just before we gapped lower. And again, with that gap, we saw the momentum signals flip on the 17th, the day after peaking on the 16th of July, and this happened. Outstanding signals. We had the gray shaded area telling us something was about to happen, and it did. We saw this big sell-off. Again, I think we'll see a bottom form, rounding the 200, above it, at it, or just below it, and horizontal support in these areas. This is where I think that we'll see the S&P likely try to bottom between 49.53 and the 5,000, the low 5,000 area. We move beyond the 200 period, maybe we drop below 5,000, tag it, then maybe we just hit the low 5,000 area. And it may be that we don't come down to horizontal support, that we bottom near the 200 and then attempt to rebound and try to move to new high. I still think that's a possibility. No guarantee that happens, but I have the guts to tell you what I think. Looking for bottoming signals, I don't see any. So again, I still think we're going to go lower. Again, we got these topping tails on the daily chart and on the 60-minute charts. The rally fizzled. Sellers shorting into the rally. We'll see if that pushes prices back down. And again, it could be more concerns about recession or tensions in the Middle East or whatever the catalyst may be, or a combination of things, again, could take us down to lower levels. Again, I want to make it clear, just as I told you up here, that I thought a top was forming into the resistance area there. I do think a bottom will form down in this area. You had a shot at it 100 period moving average. We had already broken the trend line on S&P, but NASDAQ was right at the trend line. And I told you if we could bounce with NASDAQ, you got a shot at it there. You break it decisively, look out below, you're coming down to these other areas. Way back up here, again, we may do what Bitcoin did and start moving back to the previous low over here, towards the previous low and towards the 200 period. That's what Bitcoin did, and the market's following Bitcoin. Continues to follow Bitcoin. We should see a big rally that follows this. The S&P is probably going to make a new high, and I think NASDAQ will go back and fill the gap at 20,400. If we continue to follow Bitcoin, my guess is that's going to be the case. And I told you as we were rallying into these trend lines that I was looking for them to act as resistance, that I thought a top would likely form there. It did. We got a 9 count the week before of the top on the weekly chart of the S&P. Then I told you we were going to get a 9 count in the daily time frame. We got that on Wednesday, July 10th, and we peaked through this level. We turned back and we got a topping tail. We sold off the next day on the 11th with the CPI sell-off. I told you that was likely going to be the case. Closing below the upper Bollinger Band, we completed a 9 count in the daily time frame at that time. The 9 count in the weekly time frame the week before. We saw this topping tail, and I told you the following week on the 12th, I told you that we'd likely see the next week a big ugly red bar and start moving back towards these trend lines. Okay? And that's exactly what happened. And I told you the 20-week moving average. And I told you last weekend we hit this 20-week moving average. We hit the trend line. I told you got a shot at a bottom there, but there's no guarantee we go back and fill the gaps. Guarantee this level holds. Yeah, I don't know the future. I'm looking at support and resistance levels. And again, these are the 3 support levels I'm looking at. I'm looking at this trend line. I'm looking at the trend line. This trend line from October 23, we broke it. This trend line from October 2022, well, we're coming down to it. I think you got a shot at a bounce just beyond it at horizontal support or at that trend line, one or the other. But I think you're going to bottom out somewhere between 16,764 and the 17,300 area. Somewhere in there, in that window, is a support level. You probably close below the 200 period moving average. We're rallying up. The rally was sold today. We still ended up 1% higher on NASDAQ. You're up over 2.5%. We gave back 1.5% of the rally. We gave back 291 points of the rally. We're up 474 points. We gave back 291 points, getting this little topping tail as we went back to attempt to fill the gap. We filled it on an intraday basis, but we didn't fill it on a closing basis. 18,441. We were shy of that level. I'm watching all of these gaps right here on the NASDAQ. Again, right here, I think that we're eventually going to have the NASDAQ take out the 200 period and hit this target level. Now, the low over here was 16,973, just below 17,000. And the low on the weekly chart, previously going back to the 2021 high, is 16,700 and some change. So I think we're going to bottom out here between 16,700 and the low 17,000 area, 17,300 or so, somewhere below this 200 period moving average. You'll probably drop below it. It's around the 17,700 area right now. I think you'll drop down to 16,700 to 17,300 or so, somewhere in that range. Bottom out. We'll see if we start that now, or do we still try to fill the gap here, or the one above it at 18,890. I'm watching these gaps. I think you're going to get another leg down here. I think you'll see that before the week ends. It'd be done right here because, again, there's sellers going into the rally, adding to their short positions. And again, where I'm getting the target, again, here is the 16,764 area. This trend line is, right around the 17,300 area or so, give or take, just eyeballing it. And again, that's what I'm looking at. The low here for our week was 17,435. So I'm looking in this 17,300 area or just below that at this horizontal support. Now, again, as I said, back over here, you got a shot at a bounce here at the 20 and this trend line. But if you get a decisive break above that level, and you're going down to the next level of support. And, you've got your horizontal support here and the possible head and shoulders here. Now, again, we could bounce and we can go all the way back up, get back above the trend line like Bitcoin did, and go to 20,400 and fill the gaps. But I think the NASDAQ is doing what Bitcoin did at the July low and coming down to a support level. I think will bottom under the 200. Bitcoin did, and then it rallied back up, got back above the broken trend line, and it went back and tested the high. And I think the NASDAQ will do the same thing. Bitcoin is the asset with the most volatility, but it seems that NASDAQ and S&P are following. I told you they could follow Bitcoin down from the. Remember when I was calling a Bitcoin bottom there? The July 5th low, I said, hey, it's bottoming. Bitcoin's bottoming. The stock market's going to top. And a couple days later, NASDAQ topped as we pushed into these trend lines. So I talked about that at great length and detail. Again, I don't know the future. I'm just looking at support and resistance levels. You know, maybe we bounce here, maybe we don't. My guess is we'll probably bounce. I told you if we break this level, then I'd be looking for this level to be where a bottom tries to form. We lose this level, then again, you're coming down here to this trend line. Here at the 13,500 level. Eventually, I think that this channel will end up breaking, and we'll end up coming down here to this 10,500 area at the October 2022 low. And we end up doing that, you've got a possible massive head and shoulders that could be forming here. That it's way too early to tell, but right now I'm just watching these trend lines. And I told you again, one breaks, the next one is the next level of support. This is where I'm looking right here. Also have, you know, these horizontal support levels down in here, you know, 16, just under 60, or right around 16,000 there. You've got these horizontal support levels that I'm looking at with these rising trend lines. So that's what I'm at. I think you can get a bottom, but I do think we go lower. And then I think NASDAQ will do what it did over here. I think it peaked, it comes down, and it goes back up, and it gets a lower high. This is probably an exaggerated version of what we had over here. So again, I think that this level is likely going to be where the buyers come back in at the horizontal support and the rising trend off of the October 2022 low. I think that, again, we're going to see a push back down, and maybe that's all she wrote. Maybe we go a little higher and hit these levels, but again, S&P is up testing the 100 period. NASDAQ didn't make it. Again, I think that you know, we can get this next leg down here. Big rebound with the Japanese Nikkei. Still concerns about you know, really a global recession. We still have tensions in the Middle East, which could possibly rattle the stock market. Sometimes these issues do, sometimes they don't. We don't know, and that could happen at any time. That could be a catalyst for the next big dump. Remember, again, times when these tensions, these geopolitical tensions happen, the markets have bottomed. We saw that with Russia invading Ukraine. We saw that with Israel moving into Gaza. In both of those situations, we had volatility with them, but then it created a bottom. Do we get that here? Maybe. We'll see what happens. Maybe the market ignores it completely. Maybe the market gets a violent sell-off and breaks these levels of support with it. Who knows? You never know what's going to happen with the geopolitical issue, but again, just want to continue to make you aware of that as tensions continue to heat up in the Middle East. So we got a topping tail, gave back 291 points of the rally. We hit this lower Bollinger Band, and we're getting this bounce. I think we're going to come back and test this level, and I think we'll bottom in here in this area, and then I think, again, we'll come back and try to fill these gaps. So maybe we fill this one right here now, but we are getting a topping tail, having attempted to fill it, and it failed. We did fill it on an intraday basis at this low, but not on a closing basis. But eventually, I think all these gaps will fill, whether this one gets filled right now or not. Of the 10-period moving average, you have this 18,890 gap fill, and then another one up here, 19,750 area, and then the 20,400 area up here. Eventually, I think we're coming back up here like Bitcoin. I think we'll get back above the broken trend line. I think you're going to get another lower low here. Maybe you go a little higher and do it. Maybe you do it immediately, but I'm looking for this area, and then I think this horizontal support and this level will find a bottom, and I think we're going to go back up and likely move up to here and overthrow this level where I think a top will happen. And remember what happened when Bitcoin rallied back up to test the top? You know what happened? It collapsed. Yesterday, Bitcoin dropped 14.5%. In the last week and a half, it's dropped 29%. What the semiconductors are down over the last, half weeks before we got yesterday's low. Bitcoin, when it went back up had a powerful rally back up, but then it collapsed. Watching to see if Bitcoin in the market move back to a positive correlation. I think that's very possible as they're diverging from one another. But this is the area I'm looking for a bottom in for the NASDAQ. I don't think that the bottom is here. I think we'll see a divergence develop on the MACD in the 60-minute chart time frame, and then I think we'll bottom out. We'll see what happens. We are oversold, and we're getting this rally here with this. Maybe we build upon that, but for another lower low for that MACD to form the divergence in the 60-minute time frame. Let me show you, and then what I'm looking for is a potential divergence to develop here on the MACD in the 60-minute time frame on NASDAQ and S&P 500. Okay, and before we have this big rebound back up again, I told you we could see a divergence develop here. I told you we may go a little bit lower and then get a big rebound, or we may try to rebound immediately, and we tried to rebound immediately, building upon yesterday's low. So we've come up here to the gap fill area. We were just shy of it, coming up here and turning down. We got a little topping tail at the end of the day. We'll see if we fill that gap or not. It may be we try to fill the gap and then we turn, but I'm going to be watching for this divergence to develop over the next day or two or three for the balance of the week here. I think you've got a shot at it. Again, we still may try to go a little bit higher. If that's it, and that's all she wrote, then I'll be looking for a lower low and for a divergence to happen sooner rather than later. If it drags out, again, it might be a little bit before we see it roll over, a day or two. But I am looking for a divergence here to form on the MACDs in the 60-minute time frame, and I think that will likely mark a NASDAQ bottom that I think will go beyond this low right here into, and again, this is that 17,400 area. I think you go down into the 16,700 to 17,300, dropping back below the 200 in the daily, going towards horizontal support, and I think forming this divergence, and I think you'll bottom. So again, I think that that will create a bottom, and I think, again, we rally back up here and probably fill all of these gaps. You don't have to. I don't know the future. It may not happen. I'm just telling you that, again, a shot at it, I think there's a pretty good shot. Technical analysis, we look at probability. I'm just telling you, there's a boatload of support down here where I think you're probably going to get a bottom, just like I told you up here. There was a boatload of resistance where I thought you'd get a top in that divergence, and it played out, and we've had this sell-off sharply lower. I think we go a little bit lower, and then I think we'll rebound. And again, I think we're in a topping process. My guess is NASDAQ has topped. I told you exactly what I think. I do think we're going to get a powerful rally back up like Bitcoin did. Bitcoin was not able to make a new high, and I think that we're just moving up here to this level right here. If we do get the powerful rally, and that's if, have to form a bottom first. I think that we're in a bottoming process right now, but I still think we're going lower, as I've said. If we look at the RSI, up here, I think that the RSI, again, also had a divergence at the top. I talked about that when we were slamming up into those levels of resistance. We had the CPI self. I told you we were going to go back and get a Fibonacci retracement. We hit it right on the nose. I told you, watch the 78.6 Fibonacci, likely act as resistance. We hit it, we turned down, and this happened. We've already seen divergences, and the divergences that we've had have only given us, and that's what happens in the intraday time frame, has only given us bounces. This divergence right here, that gave us, in this divergence back over here, this gave us a bounce. This divergence had given us a bounce back up to gap resistance. Everybody said it's over, it's over, it's over. I told you we were likely going to still at gap resistance and resume the decline. That happened. I told you I thought we'd go lower because I thought we were in a wave 5. Elliott wave is speculation. I have other counts going on that in mind, but I thought we'd move to new lows. We did, and now I still think we're going to move to a new low. This divergence right here, this larger one, gave us this bounce. So we've had these divergences, bounce, bounce, and now this one giving us this bounce. A little tiny diversion, or I'm sorry, we had a, nope, never mind, that's a confirmation of a higher low. We had RSI push up here, and again, maybe the move's not done yet, but we're starting to turn off this level. Again, I think that you can see the RSI come back down and get another reference point of a divergence, or go a little bit higher and then come back down should we attempt to fill this gap, or maybe go to gap resistance right here, just above the 18,600 area or so. Again, just some levels I'm watching. and our 50 period is at that level. We'll be watching, do we make it to the 50 period or do we just start turning? But I do think we're eventually coming down here. We'll see if we build upon the rally further. If this is a pullback and we build upon it further, or do we start the next leg down? There were some sellers here as we attempted to fill the gap. We'll see if that's all she wrote or not. But again, I do think we're going to get a multiple point divergence here on the RSI. And I do think that the MACD down over here will end up forming a bullish divergence.